Let's dive into the cities where gangs don't just exist in the shadows. They rule entire communities, dictate the pace of life, and turn streets into battlegrounds. These aren't just dangerous places, they are war zones within urban landscapes. Stay with me until the end because when we get to number one, you'll see how even one of the richest countries on earth can't escape the grip of gang violence. Number 5, Cape Town, South Africa. Cape Town is known worldwide for its breathtaking scenery, but beneath the beauty lies one of the deadliest gang environments on the planet. The violence centers around the Cape Flats, an area where entire generations were displaced during apartheid. Families were forced out of central neighborhoods and pushed into poverty-stricken, overcrowded settlements. Out of this forced segregation, gangs emerged as the only form of power and identity for young people. By the 1980s, the Cape Flats had turned into a breeding ground for powerful organizations. The Americans, the Hard Livings, the Sexy Boys, and the 28's Prison Gang all carved out territories. What makes Cape Town unique is how interconnected street gangs and prison gangs are. The infamous numbers gangs, 26s, 27s, and 28s, control the prisons, and their influence spills directly into the neighborhoods outside. These groups aren't small-time players. They traffic weapons, control methamphetamine, known locally as tick, and even export drugs internationally. For everyday residents, this means living in a war zone. Shootings can erupt outside schools, churches, or grocery stores. Children in the Cape Flats are often taught to drop to the ground when gunfire starts, because stray bullets are part of daily life. The government's response has been to deploy the army into gang-ridden areas, turning neighborhoods into militarized zones. But even that hasn't broken the cycle. Cape Town's problem is bigger than just crime. It's the legacy of systemic inequality that left an entire population vulnerable to gang control. Number 4, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Rio de Janeiro's favelas are legendary for their vibrant culture, but they're also ground zero for some of the world's most violent gangs. Groups like Comando Vermelho and Amigos dos Amigos dominate these hillside communities, where the state has historically had little presence. These gangs do more than sell drugs. They function as shadow governments. They tax residents, run utilities, and enforce their own justice. If someone commits a crime within gang-controlled territory, punishment comes from the gang, not the police. In some favelas, residents even rely on the gangs for food, medical help, and protection. The conflict escalates when heavily armed police raid the favelas. These operations resemble military battles. Armored vehicles roll into narrow streets while helicopters hover overhead. Gunfights can last hours, leaving both criminals and civilians dead. In 2009, gang members made global headlines when they shot down a police helicopter, proving just how militarized these groups had become. The gangs also maintain a strange relationship with the culture of Rio. Brazilian funk music, known as baile funk, often glorifies gang leaders, turning them into folk heroes. For many young people with no opportunities, joining a gang is seen as the only way to gain respect, power, or financial security. The brutal reality is that Rio's favelas exist in a state of dual rule. By day, people try to live normal lives, going to school, working, raising families. By night, the sound of automatic weapons echoes through the hills, a reminder that the gangs are always in control. Number 3, San Pedro Sula, Honduras. San Pedro Sula was once called the murder capital of the world, and that title wasn't an exaggeration. At its peak, the city recorded over 170 murders per 100,000 people, numbers that rival war zones. And at the center of it all were two rival gangs, MS-13 and Barrio 18. Both gangs trace their roots back to Los Angeles, where they were formed by immigrant communities in the 1980s. When members were deported back to Central America, they rebuilt their organizations in places like Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. San Pedro Sula became one of their most important battlegrounds. In this city, Gangs don't just deal drugs, they control life itself. They extort businesses, charging a war tax to anyone trying to operate a store, a taxi, or even a food stand. Bus drivers are forced to pay weekly fees, and those who refuse are often burned alive inside their vehicles as warnings. Families who can't pay extortion money are forced to flee their homes or face execution. The gangs recruit heavily from local youth, many as young as 12 years old, for children growing up in poverty but with no schools or jobs. Joining a gang feels like the only option. Refusal can mean death. Not just for the child, but for their entire family. At its worst, the city operated under a shadow government enforced by MS-13 and Barrio 18. They set curfews, decided who could enter certain neighborhoods, and imposed their own laws. Even though international aid and policing efforts have brought murder rates down in recent years, San Pedro Sula still lives in the shadow of its violent past. To this day, the gangs remain deeply entrenched in the city's social fabric. Number 2. Tijuana, Mexico. Tijuana is more than just a border city. It's a front line in one of the deadliest conflicts of the modern era. Sitting right across from San Diego, California, Tijuana is the gateway to the U.S. market for Mexican cartels. Whoever controls this city controls one of the richest drug corridors in the world, and that has made it a constant battlefield. In the 1990s, Tijuana was ruled by the Arellano Felix organization, a cartel so feared that its leaders became infamous on both sides of the border. But as their power collapsed, other groups moved in. Today, the war is fought mainly between the Sinaloa Cartel and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, two of the most powerful criminal organizations in the world. The violence here is brutal and public. Cartels leave bodies hanging from bridges as warnings. Mass graves are discovered in the desert outside the city. Drive-by shootings erupt in busy streets. Journalists, police officers, and even politicians are targeted if they cross the wrong people. For ordinary citizens, survival often means keeping your head down and saying nothing. What makes Tijuana stand out is not just the sheer number of murders, but the atmosphere of fear. The murder rate here regularly ranks among the highest in the world, with thousands of killings every year. And because the cartels are fighting for control of a billion-dollar pipeline into the United States, the violence shows no sign of slowing down. Tijuana is a reminder that gang and cartel violence isn't hidden. It happens in broad daylight, right at the doorstep of one of the most powerful countries in the world. Number 1. Chicago, United States. When most people think of gangs in America, they think of Chicago. This city has been shaped by organized crime for over a century. From Al Capone's bootlegging empire during Prohibition to the sprawling street gangs of today. But what makes Chicago unique is how its gang landscape has evolved and how dangerous it has become. Unlike cartels or prison gangs, Chicago's gangs are highly fragmented. Instead of a few large organizations, the city has hundreds of small sets, each controlling only a few blocks. Groups like the Gangster Disciples, Vice Lords, and Latin Kings once had strong leadership structures. But decades of arrests and internal wars shattered those hierarchies. What remains are countless micro-gangs, each fighting over tiny corners of territory. This fragmentation makes the violence unpredictable. A feud that starts with a social media post or a rap lyric can turn into a shooting within hours. Online clout wars spill into the streets, where young gang members carry out ambushes and retaliations. The cycle of revenge never ends because there's no central authority to call a truce. The statistics are staggering. Chicago records hundreds of homicides every year, many of them gang-related. Entire neighborhoods are locked in generational cycles of violence, where children grow up expecting to lose friends and family to gunfire. And despite decades of anti-gang initiatives, the problem persists. Chicago is also a cultural epicenter of gang identity. Drill music, born in the city, has spread worldwide exporting the stories of these neighborhoods to millions of listeners. But while the music brings fame, it also fuels the conflicts, with rival sets turning lyrics into deadly challenges. What sets Chicago apart from every other city on this list is its mix of history, culture, and scale. This isn't just gang violence, it's a deeply rooted system that has shaped politics, policing, and even the national conversation about crime in America. For many, Chicago is proof that gang violence is not only a problem in poor, unstable countries, it can thrive in one of the most developed nations on earth. From Cape Town's endless turf wars to Rio's favelas under shadow rule to San Pedro Sula's control by MS-13 and Barrio 18, each city on this list shows how gangs can rise when governments fail. In Tijuana, cartel empires fight bloody battles over billion-dollar drug routes. And in Chicago, decentralized street gangs have turned one of America's greatest cities into a symbol of urban violence. These cities are very different in culture, language, and history, but they share the same root causes: poverty, inequality, corruption, and the lure of power. Wherever these conditions exist, gangs will fill the vacuum. If you made it this far, you clearly care about understanding the hidden forces that shape our world. Make sure you subscribe for more deep dives into the dark side of history, crime, and society. And let me know in the comments, what city do you think deserves a place on this list?